have Christo and Sean here.
Hello.
Our two stalwarts. Is that the expression, stalwarts?
Yeah.
Yeah. What does that mean?
Like,
what's a ward?
Stalwart, somebody who's like always there.
Okay, yeah, but what does it mean? Where did it come from?
Oh, I have no idea.
What?
Stall the ball ward.
Stall the ball? Stalwarts?
Stalwarts.
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 Still warts?
This show is starting with a bang, baby.
Boom! What you gonna do?
So Christo had the idea of talking about the shadow this week, which is basically, in psychology terms, we have our ego, which is the parts of our personality that we acknowledge and have in our conscious mind, and then the shadow is generally the parts of ourselves that we don't want to acknowledge as part of ourselves. So generally it's called the shadow. So for example, if we were to let's say look at somebody and judge them in some way, shape or form, for something they're doing, that would be the byproduct of that would be that we're building up our own ego, saying that I am better than them because of X, and really then that's showing that there's another part of your personality that's oppressed and that's not being acknowledged, which might be you might be an absolute bastard and you're not really acknowledging that side of your life. But anyway, I'm explaining that very bad. But
do you mean that, like, if you see someone and you judge them for doing something you think's bad, that really you
want to make yourself feel better?
You recognize? No. What do you mean?
So whenever we judge somebody else, we don't want to get judged. No one wants to get judged. But when you judge somebody else or anything else, what you're doing is you're separating yourself from it and saying that you're different than that and you're better than that. So you're trying to, a byproduct of saying something you don't like or don't approve of is that you're better or not part of that activity. And then someone else might look at your activity and do the same thing, and we all do that to each other all the time because we don't want to acknowledge that as a whole we are, again, if you want to bring it to the cosmic land here again, we're all the one thing, but yet we're all negatively judging different aspects of ourselves.
So we're just judging ourselves.
Yes, basically.
When we judge somebody else.
And that's why they always say that whatever you don't like in somebody else is what you don't like in yourself. So it's like, look at that fat lazy person. You're like, well, you're actually judging that part of your nature that's lazy and maybe gives in to desires and stuff too much. And that when you don't acknowledge that part of yourself, well then that's the part of yourself that will slowly grow in the darkness, in the shadows, and one day you'll be an unhappy, maybe lazy person that's not doing the things they should be doing. But that's just the theory of it, and again, I'm not explaining it very well. Christo's here staring at me, looking kind of pensive here. I think he'll probably explain it better. I'll tell you what I'll do. While Christo's giving his thoughts, I'll get up an internet proper definition. Go for it.
Yeah, I think, no, you didn't mess that up at all. You were explaining it well, especially in psychological terms. I think outside of psychological terms, it can also represent just our dark inherent nature at times, because I don't believe personally that anyone is truly benevolent completely. We try to be, many of us, a lot of people might believe that they are, but I think there is a certain delusion in the belief that you are completely benevolent. And I think the greatest awareness is knowing that you are not perfect, you are human, and that yes, you do have a shadow. Yes, you are greedy sometimes. Yes, you are competitive. Yes, sometimes you want to be better than someone else, and you also have to question and discipline that shadow lovingly, not in a sense that you run away from it, because then you're not facing it, but look at it straight in its shadow eyes and say, I know you're part of me. I accept that. I accept that you're going to be here sometimes, but you're not allowed to control this ship. You know? But every now and then it comes out, and that's fine.
I found that little video here. Do you want me to play it, and then it'll give us a better discussion point instead of me fumbling around in the darkness about my idea of what it is? Let's just play what it is. So
Man's real life consists of a complex of inexorable opposites, day and night, birth and death, happiness and misery, good and evil. We are not even sure that one will prevail over the other, that good will overcome evil, or joy defeat pain. Life is a battleground. It always has been and always will be. Of the many metaphors used to describe a life in process, the metaphor of a battle is one of the more appropriate. In this battle, our own self is both our greatest ally and greatest opponent, with a dynamic tension existing between those elements of our personality moving us forward into personal growth and those holding us back. Each person must also contend with the potential for both good and evil that lies within. Whether our strengths and capacity for good get the upper hand, or our weakness and capacity for evil, is very much a product of this battle waged within the self. Far too many people, however, set themselves up for defeat as they are unwilling to acknowledge the destructive side of their being. Utilizing various psychological defense mechanisms, such people do their best to stay ignorant to their faults and weaknesses. In so doing, these elements of their personality are relegated to their unconscious and make up the realm of the psyche Jung called the shadow. The shadow exerts an active influence on our personality and affects our behavior in a myriad of unforeseen ways. When we behave in a manner which is a product of our shadow, perhaps we treat someone poorly or take part in a self-destructive behavior, rather than taking responsibility for such actions, most people make use of the psychological phenomenon known as projection in order to avoid facing up to their shadow. In this video, we are going to explore the phenomenon of projection by looking at the dangers it poses to the well-being of both the individual and society at large. Projection occurs when we attribute an element of our personality, which resides in our unconscious, to another person or group. We can project both negative and positive characteristics, however, there is a greater tendency to project the former rather than the latter. Sigmund Freud, who popularized the term in the mid-1890s, believed projection to be a defense mechanism used to avoid the anxiety that is provoked when one is forced to face up to their faults, weaknesses, and destructive tendencies. Jung's view of projection was similar to Freud's, and as he explains in Archaic Man, projection is one of the commonest psychic phenomena. Everything that is unconscious in ourselves we discover in our neighbor, and we treat him accordingly. Jung, however, stressed that projection was both an inevitable and necessary component in our psychological development, as it is one of the primary means by which we can gain an awareness of elements residing in our unconscious. After projecting an element of our unconscious, the healthy thing to do is to recognize the subjective origin of the projection, to withdraw it from the external world, and to integrate this element of our personality into conscious awareness. Only by withdrawing our projections and becoming aware of the faults we previously projected onto others can we ever hope to take corrective measures. This process of withdrawal and integration is a difficult task, for it takes courage to face up to one's weaknesses and dark qualities. But while difficult, this task is crucial in the battle of life, for failure to confront one's shadow leaves these elements free to grow in scope and influence, as Jung explains. When one tries desperately to be good and wonderful and perfect, then all the more the shadow develops a definite will to be black and evil and destructive. People cannot see that. They are always striving to be marvelous, and then they discover that terrible destructive things happen which they cannot understand. And they either deny that such facts have anything to do with them, or if they admit them, they take them for natural afflictions, or they try to minimize them and to shift the responsibility elsewhere. The fact is that if one tries beyond one's capacity to be perfect, the shadow descends into hell and becomes the devil. Those who rely too heavily on projection to shield them from their shadow, who never strive to question whether the image they hold of themselves is perhaps too perfect, go through life forever in need of scapegoats or people on whom to blame all their problems. Often a friend or family member is chosen as one's scapegoat, but the problem with this choice is that it irreparably damages and in many cases forces an end to the relationship. After driving away one's scapegoat, it is usually discovered that one's problems persist nonetheless. This spurs some to look within and to face up to the elements of their personality they have for so long tried to deny. But rather than partaking in this internal reflection, most people merely look for another scapegoat. In this process, it is often discovered that the most effective form of scapegoat is not any individual in particular, but rather entire groups of people. This tendency of scapegoating to occur on a collective level can have dangerous consequences for a society. Those unwilling or unable to face up to their shadows are easy prey for collectivist movements which have ready-made scapegoats in the form of political opponents, members of different ethnic groups or socioeconomic classes. Scapegoating at the level of collectives, or in other words, projecting our problems onto groups of people who differ from us, proves attractive for several reasons. It allows us to avoid the damage to our personal relationships which occurs when we use someone close to us as a scapegoat. Furthermore, given that our interactions with members of the scapegoated group are usually limited, we do not risk awakening to the realization that these people are not nearly like the distorted image of them we hold in our psyche. Scapegoating at a group level is made easier by the fact that those in the scapegoated group, being composed of individuals with their own weaknesses and flaws, may in fact behave in ways that provide legitimate reasons for indignation, or as Jung put it, not that these others are wholly without blame, for even the worst projection is at least hung on a hook, perhaps a very small one, but still a hook offered by the other person. But as Jung recognized, there is a tendency within collectivist movements to take this small hook offered by one's opponents and to hang on it virtually all that is wrong with oneself in the world. When we cast a group of people in this negative light, seeing them as the primary source of all that ails a society, it becomes possible to justify persecution, violence, and perhaps even extermination of the group in question. Projection at the level of collectives becomes even more dangerous as those in positions of power can divert attention away from their own activities and the harm they may be causing by using propaganda, false flags, and other manipulation techniques in order to cast blame onto ready-made scapegoats. Due to the terrible consequences that can emerge at both the level of the individual and of society when we fail to recognize, in the words of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, that the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being, it is of the utmost importance that we strive to recognize our shadow qualities and to integrate them into our conscious awareness. Only then will we be in an adequate position to evaluate the true sources of evil in this world. On the other hand, if we fail to recognize the subjective origin of our projections, not only will our own well-being suffer, but we will contribute on a global scale to much unnecessary conflict. Jung went as far as to suggest that if psychological projection at a collective level became too widespread, war would be the likely outcome. For he believed that the greatest danger to civilization lay not in the weapons we have at our disposal, but in our inability to understand our own selves. For it is this ignorance and the failure to face up to our own weaknesses and destructiveness that causes what should be an internal battle to manifest itself in the external world. Modern people, wrote Jung, are ignorant of what they really are. We have simply forgotten what a human being really is, so we have men like Nietzsche and Freud and Adler who tell us what we are quite mercilessly. We have to discover our shadow, otherwise we are driven into a world war in order to see what beasts we are.
Ooh. Beasts.
Yeah, but that's what we are.
That's right. I think so. I expressed it poorly enough, basically.
You didn't.
That if, unless
That's
you...
your shadow talking.
That's your shadow talking. You didn't.
Well, unless you develop your self-inquiry enough to the point where you can see that you're a selfish person, you have desires that are basically selfishly motivated, that you put the blame on others rather than take responsibility for things. And as I said in the video, that some people might provide that little hook, like they might treat you badly. Let's say the Jews in Germany, for example, Hitler basically put all of the nation's woes on the Jews, and then the German people caught on to that and placed all the blame on them, and then all of a sudden you have a Holocaust kind of thing, rather than realizing that it's down, that the line between good and evil runs down the middle of every human heart, and that we're all capable of good and bad things, and that any scapegoats that you put the evil on them, I'm not bad, they're the bad ones, then you can just inflict serious atrocities on people, and we need to face that side of ourselves.
This is the thing. It's right there. It's simple. The shadow is the one. For example, you shine a light on yourself. The light is the opposite of the shadow. It can create the shadow, because when you're in the light, sometimes you will lie to yourself. But to truly be in the light, you have to be so totally aware to know that you are partly a beast, and that you do have these tendencies, and that you're not some perfect being, if whatever perfect is, you're not completely benevolent. You try to be, but if the more aware we are of where we are lacking and the mistakes that we make and our weaknesses, then that's the greater, I suppose, distributed power that we have in terms of creating a better society. because it's all about awareness, really.
Mm.
It's not about running away and trying to become better and good and totally good, because is that possible?
I don't know if I mean, it's the concepts of good and bad that cause a lot of problems.
Well, this is the
themselves.
thing, yeah. So
Mm.
a lot of the things within our nature, or everything within every single individual's nature, cannot be seen as good by everyone. And there needs to be an awareness and an acceptance that, or of that, I should say, that you are both the good and the bad.
Mm.
But it's about having the awareness so that you can discipline that and take the best out of a partly good
Mm.
and partly bad situation or being.
And that's why it's great when you have people like Jordan Peterson out there who will spot things early and go, I know what you guys are doing. You saying you're standing up for X, that you're standing up for the rights of these people, but really you just hate those people, and you don't really want to help anybody. You just want to take down these other people. Now, that's not always the case, but there are these people who have such a deep understanding of the human psyche that they'll point out that we're being hypocritical and we're causing problems when we want to believe the part of ourselves that we've identified with is, I'm trying to create social change for the positive, but really you're just bitter because you're poor and you're uneducated, or you have different problems. Now, again, that's not always the case. There's obviously very good causes and reasons to stand up to society, but you really do need to understand yourself a lot. Sean.
Yes.
You're daydreaming. No, you're deep introspecting. Tell us how we're wrong, please.
Oh, you're wrong. Oh, no, I don't think you're wrong. It sounds very sensible. I think that's what, when people are meditating, that's what they're doing. They're trying to be aware of their thoughts, and often their thoughts are patterns of thoughts that keep repeating. So it's about getting to know yourself. So that includes all the negative thought patterns, as well as, just the weird random thoughts. So I guess there is a value judgment of good and bad still, though, because we're saying that we should, or is there? I don't know. Are we saying that the shadow it's the bad part of ourselves?
No.
We're labeling it bad?
No.
It's the unacknowledged part of ourselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's the part that that maybe, exactly like Mark said, the unacknowledged part, the part of ourselves that a lot of us don't want to see, that we don't want to believe is part of us, that we don't accept,
that we label as bad.
We label as bad.
So that's the problem. Okay.
Yeah, we label as bad maybe because we feel that society will not perceive it in a good way, which in most cases is true, because there are a lot of things that can, like we've spoken about before, the dark passenger that can live in your head, your mind, right? And you're walking down the street and you think something terrible by walking past someone sometimes. It doesn't mean you actually think that about that person, because straight away another part of you, the conscious part, is going, wait, why did I even think that? That's terrible. But it's like you can't control it sometimes. And we've spoken about this before, how we aren't in control sometimes. But this is all an inherent part of our nature. An inherent part of nature itself is both birth and death. That in itself is just a show of how this reality is built. Animals can be so beautiful, so cute, and then they can kill too. They're beasts. This is it. But we don't need to run away from that nature, because it's the truth. And I think the further we run away from what is true, the more we get lost in a delusional world. And that's why we have so many of these problems. Like, that's why we have, let's talk about Trump being president, right? There's a man that doesn't recognize his shadow. There's a man that probably thinks he's amazing and he's great, and obviously we've spoken about this before, it's the ego. The ego is very much the lack of acknowledgement of the shadow. Because you start to believe that you're this perfect being. But everyone has some sort of agenda. And, sometimes agendas can be quite pure in terms of they really can improve society. but they can also be furthering your own ego, extending it, hyperinflating it. But as long as you're aware of that and not saying, no, I'm not doing this for my ego, as long as you say, yes, I am doing this for a pure reason, but I also get a little bit of joy, a little bit of, it tickles my ego a bit, you know? At least you're being honest.
It's like, oh, I really want to help people, and I really want to, okay, do it for free then. Well, I need to live, I need to buy a house,
exactly,
I need a
right?
car. Oh, well, how about you get minimum wage then? Oh, well, I want more than minimum wage. Okay, so you don't just want to help people. You also want to have a little bit of status, a little bit of money, a little bit of power, a little bit of this, that, and the other. So it's about not just going, God, I really want to help people with my creative work and inspire people. Well, yeah, you want all the money and fame too, though, don't you? You know, and then once you acknowledge that and you go deep into that, then you can actually decide to either own up to that and say, okay, well, I want those things too, or else you go, actually, yeah, those things are motivating me more than I realized. Maybe I don't want to be motivated by those things as much. Maybe I should change the reasons why I'm doing things. Personally, here's my non-shadow side, just perking up my ego side coming up. Personally, I've realized recently that going down the clinical psychology route, it gives you more social standing, esteem, money, job opportunities, everything else. But I think I'm going to go down the counselling side of things, and get much less money, much the actual
connection with regular
the
people.
actual work will be much more rewarding, I think, but the wages will be a lot lower. But actually, through thinking about it a lot, I mean, that's if I'm coming home in the evenings thinking, wow, I'm doing something valuable here, I think it's worth less money, you know.
But even then, think about it. Even then, when money is not involved, you're still feeding some sort of desire to feel good.
Of course, yeah.
It's like, I'm doing this.
Yeah. To feel more altruistic about
yeah,
myself.
it's like, look, I'm such a good person because I'm doing this. Again, we can't.
You can't escape
get away
that,
with it.
But to be honest, I think the reason why people do feel so shit about themselves a lot of the time is because the things that make you feel good about yourself generally are the things you should be doing. For example, doing a little bit of exercise. You might be doing that because you want to feel fit and strong and healthy and have that little bit of ego boost. But that ego boost and that feeling of being fit and strong and healthy is also a positive thing that gives you those positive feelings anyway. So.
Exactly. And so this is the thing. It's like we live in a society that we have half people that are being overly selfish and then half the people that just keep trying to proclaim selflessness even though there is a selfishness in them, but they won't acknowledge it. But really, it has to be in tandem where you recognize that you have to be selfish to be selfless as well.
Both sides. Unless you're going to be like someone like Sri Ramana Maharshi or something where you live naked with a piece of cloth around you and you barely talk to anybody. And, I mean, he is a living saint. Well, not living. He was a saint, but basically he had no desire for any power whatsoever. So that meant money, anything.
To be totally selfless, you have to just not speak to anybody.
Basically,
you have to just sit there and say nothing. And eat. There you go.
Yeah. It's not a life that many people choose to live.
Yeah.
But then again, through his writings and things like that, then he inspires people to show them that this is the other side of the capitalist society, or not even capitalist society, but the mass culture. He's basically
But then, by writing, he's still then doing some form of what a peacock will do in showing his feathers.
True, yeah. Yeah, again, he's trying to show that this is the way that's worked for him and...
Right, my way.
Yeah, well, you see, I don't know. I don't know if because I haven't. I mean, this is the way.
Do you see what I'm getting at here?
Absolutely, yeah.
You have
more and more.
You have a very negative view of humanity.
Not really. I don't think it's negative. I think it's balanced. It's a balanced view. It's to see that there's both negative and positive in everything.
But why even say that it's negative?
Because it depends on how you perceive it. So it's not necessarily, maybe it's not even negative and positive at the same time.
It just is.
This is philosophy.
But what does the negative and positive live within?
Exactly.
Awareness.
Right.
And there's no awareness is not neither negative or positive, and it doesn't pass any judgments,
Exactly.
and it can't acknowledge it. So you have the polarity of positive and negative, but both of those exist within awareness, and there's no opposite to awareness. You might say unawareness, but if you can experience your heart beating even without thinking, there's awareness of your heart beating, and that's not a positive thing. It's not a negative thing. It's literally just awareness. When you're asleep, there's still awareness. There's always awareness, and so duality lives within awareness, and that's that I don't know if you want to call it dimension. Dimension is always a word that kind of, when I was younger anyway, it was always a word that I was like, right, this person's talking bullshit. But there's different dimensions of living. There's that polarity dimension that we all exist with. In every word I say is basically splitting the world up into pieces and creating positive and negative ideas, and hot is only a thing in comparison to cold.
Yeah.
Because you can't say that is hot without something that compares to it, which is cold. But there's no opposite to awareness, because hot and cold exist within awareness. And so that's the extra level, the level above, that level where you're thought free, where you're meditative, and you're just in contact with the awareness. And as you said, you can't control your thoughts. So your thoughts are running. So the content of awareness is changing all the time, but the awareness never changes. That's why if you get a brain injury and you become a vegetable, someone might say, oh, but now you've affected your brain and your consciousness is different. No, the content of consciousness is now different, but the consciousness that's aware of things is always the same. It's the same if you're a pigeon or Albert Einstein. It's something that is aware.
What do you mean by
the
the same, though?
As in, it's unchanging, never changes. It's been that way forever. It'll always be that way. It's witnessing everything that's going on. What is hearing your thoughts right now, Christo?
Again, I think it comes back to how you perceive it all again. It's like, it's just a loop. It's a constant loop.
But you're perceiving through thoughts.
Exactly.
But if you stop doing that,
everything just is then.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know what you mean by in that sense.
And
but
then the world is no longer how we perceive it through language. It is literally how it is. You lose the idea of time, goes away. Anything that's not happening right now is irrelevant because it's not happening right now. So it's just an idea. Fear lives within thoughts. So you can't be afraid. Well, that's not true. I was going to say you can't be irrationally afraid without thinking. So like if there's a tiger chasing you, it doesn't matter what the fuck you're thinking, you're going to be scared. But if you're sitting in a room right now, and let's say there was no one else here, let's say all of us are here, and you just started worrying about exams, about death, about injury, about sickness, you can get yourself quite scared. But all that is just inside your own head.
So no words.
Exactly. But that's what meditation is about. It's about letting because you can't control the thoughts. It's about letting them run their course without adding to them by trying to have a conversation with them. So if something comes to your head, you know the way you're saying you're walking around and you're like, fuck, I shouldn't have thought that. Well, now you're giving that first thought a little bit of credence, and now you're having a dialogue between yourself about what you should and shouldn't do. But if you let that initial thought just pass by, you create that space where there's a little bit of a gap between the next thought. You're not having the argument. So what the theory is that the less you talk to yourself, the more the gaps will increase, and eventually your mind will quieten by itself. But what we all do is go, Jesus Christ, I can't believe I thought that. Stop thinking. I have to stop thinking. Shit, I'm still thinking. But all you have to do is just ignore what came before that and let it go, and then the gaps get bigger. But that it is a discipline.
And there you go, and there you come back to it, the total acceptance of everything and just not saying anything.
But like, so you're saying awareness, aka being or whatever? No?
Well,
same thing.
Yeah,
this is another word
basically,
for it.
Whatever state you're in when you're not thinking, that's even then, even when you are thinking, there's something that is aware of your thinking and aware of what's happening.
And do we know? Does it know how to act?
No, it doesn't.
Doesn't do or think.
It literally is. That's the whole idea of free will. It's sitting there. You do whatever the fuck you want.
But then there is the moral. There, to maybe use the wrong word. There's a sense of this is wrong and this is right, and does that not come from, or this is what I should do or shouldn't do? Does that not come from awareness?
Nope.
No.
Okay. Awareness passes
then
no comment, and anything that's any idea that we have of right or wrong or up or down or anything else is only existing within that awareness that's separate from it.
But can you act without thinking? Like,
Of course you can act without thinking. You did it with your mirror.
yeah.
Do you believe in free will?
But then that's
You're acting like thinking now. You're just moving that thing in your hand. Did you think about it?
no.
No, you didn't. No, I'm playing with this. I wasn't thinking about it. Sorry, I have a little wire in my hand.
But do you think you have free will?
Depends on your definition of free will. So if you
I
have
don't
free
know.
will as an ego through thoughts, no. Free will as the one consciousness of everything, of course you do. Otherwise, nothing would exist. This is your own creation. Here we are.
So you're saying awareness gives us free will, or is free will?
Oh God, we could go down. This
This is what I love about this, because it's like you're challenging perception, and I love that because you just end up going in
It's-
like mirroring mirrors.
The problem is though is that there's when you're talking about awareness, which doesn't have dualistic language to it, it doesn't have any language to it. It's literally just awareness, and it's all you can say about it. Is that then when you try and talk about it, you're doing so with language which isn't awareness, which means that you can't express what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Which is why everybody always says you can't talk about it.
Yeah,
And then-
exactly. You
but-
can't explain
But
it.
it's fun to point towards it. So,
Mhm.
for example, for anybody, we haven't done this, and I've thought about doing it. It's not fantastic for radio, but I'll do it with you now. All right, fuck it.
Who cares?
Fuck the
Who
listeners.
cares, man?
Anyone out there, just play along. All right.
Who cares?
So, sit up straight.
Oh,
Sit up
okay.
straight.
Okay, go on.
Okay. All right. Close your eyes. Close your eyes. Now put your finger. No. Okay. Take a nice big breath in for me. And relax your all the muscles in your chest as you breathe out. And one more. Now do your best to stop thinking for about 30 seconds while you breathe. Okay, slowly come back. So,
That felt good.
so did you have some thoughts in your head?
Probably. They were vague, but
Very-
yeah,
that's
I'd say
good.
so.
Your hours of meditation is paying off, Sean. But for most people out there, there'll be a few thoughts going through your head, and generally, the perception of meditation is you're supposed to stop thinking. But it's as we said before that when the thoughts do arrive, you just again let them go. It's a push pull. It's like because the thoughts exist within that lower dimension of duality. There's always going to be the positive and the negative side of it, so there's a push to it and there's a pull to it. But if you push too hard or pull too hard, you're out of balance. So for example, a thought comes in that you don't want, and so what do? You try and push that away, but you're not supposed to do that. Don't push. And then, or else you're in the dark, you're in the quiet, there's no thoughts there, and you start feeling a little bit uncomfortable. So then you start thinking, so then you're pulling a thought towards you. And so once you realize that you're doing that you sit there and you just let it play itself out without trying to interact with it. So a thought comes, let's say, oh, I'm still thinking. You're like, okay, well then what you do then is you don't reply to that thought, and then you're not pushing it away. It just goes away by itself. Or else if you're feeling uncomfortable in the silence, you don't go, oh, I feel a little uncomfortable, I have to think about something, because then you're pulling it towards you. So you literally just have to let everything flow. And it's very, very hard to do that because we're used to just thinking. And it also shows you that you don't have any control. So any idea of free will, well, you didn't choose to think, did you? When you're there, you're trying to actively not think, and you can't because you don't have any controls whatsoever. So the part of us that we think we are, our identity, the very fucking how we live our whole lives is through our mental processes, and we actually can't even fucking control the thing. We can't control it because we are not that. We're not the thoughts. So how can we control something when we think we are that thing? It's like, I don't know. I think there was a very good analogy of that Adyashanti said there a few days ago. So imagine you have a clenched fist, right? And you want to annihilate that fist. That fist is your ego. You don't want to have this ego anymore, but you think you are this fist. You are the ego. Now I'm absolutely massacre this as well, but I'm doing my best. So it's like you want to annihilate the fist, but you can't annihilate the fist because you are the fist. So then you just release it, and now the fist is gone, but the hand is still there. Thoughts are still going to be there, but it's very different now. The fist is gone. The idea that you were the fist is gone. The thoughts are still there. The hand is still there, but now you've got a very different perspective. So when you're trying to get rid of your ego, you're trying to get rid of something that you think you are, but you're not that in the first place. You're something beyond that. You're that next level up, that awareness, that consciousness behind it. And then once you identify with that over time, then you can actually control your thoughts. But you can't control your thoughts when you think you are your thoughts. Anyway, that's enough from me.
You said control your thoughts.
Yeah.
Actually, what do you mean? Like,
well, I guess when I get up out of bed in the morning, I think, okay, I'm going to go and do this. I'm going to go. Let's say I'm going to go wash my teeth, for example. Right? I get out of bed. I'm going to go wash my teeth, and then I walk out to wash my teeth. But what's actually happening, if you are present enough, is that you're hijacking what's actually going on anyway. So you actually got up and went to wash your teeth, but you didn't choose the thought in your head to say, I'm going to go wash my teeth. That just came into your head because you're not in control of that thought. But because we don't look at our thoughts deeply enough, we think, well, I thought. Well, who thought? The thought?
Who's I? Who's you?
Yeah, who's I? Is the I the thought? No, the thought was I'm going to go wash my teeth.
so then who decided to brush their teeth then?
Exactly, the whole being,
Okay.
the whole thing.
You wouldn't say awareness decided, would you?
No, because it's the content of it's within awareness. But this is separating. So you can separate awareness from everything else. But again, that's why you can't talk about it, because if you label it as awareness, then it's the thing that's not awareness. So here's where it gets even more complicated. Awareness combined with everything.
Yeah. if we just say that like awareness is like a picture, you have the canvas. So awareness is the canvas, and everything else is just on top of that.
Exactly. Very, very well said. Exactly. But you can't separate the canvas from what's happening, because let's imagine it's a cinema screen, right? But there's always a movie playing.
But you can get rid of all the paint occasionally. Get rid of all the thought and just have it just be the canvas.
Exactly.
But if you're just the canvas and you're getting up to brush your teeth,
so there's it's very hard to do it because we think all the time. But imagine, or maybe try it tonight. Sit on the edge of your bed and decide you're not going to move until you move without thinking. So you're going to sit there and you're going to be like, you're not going to say before you lie down in bed, oh, I think I'll lie down now, in your head. Or you're not going to say, I'm going to stand up before you stand up, and you just sit there and you wait. And then you'll find that eventually you will do something without thinking. Anything. Could be scratching your ear, but you didn't think about it. And then you will see that a lot of people will now then say, oh, you've got your subconscious mind and your conscious mind. But that's not what's going on. Is that the conscious mind that's creating that dialogue isn't necessary at all. But it's comforting to us, because the more we think that we're our thoughts, the more we can have our small little world and our protected viewpoint and your story and time, my past, what will happen in the future. But the more we stay in the moment without thought, the less secure we are, the less we can predict the future, the more uncomfortable we feel in the unknown, and that's why we continue to jump to the next thought as quickly as we can, because it's much more comforting to feel like we have control when really we don't.
Yeah, and then that's why I think people feel so uncomfortable when they do psychedelics, because they end up entering the subconscious imagination, and then they feel like they have less control because they're not under the illusion of this conscious illusion. This is why I was kind of putting this, and I've loved this. This is brilliant.
Yeah, that dance, you have to get used to the dance of it when you're on psychedelics. So you can't control your thoughts. There's thoughts coming in. You can't control almost anything that's happening whatsoever, and you got to chill. You got to chill out. But you only exist as thoughts, so you can't chill out, and you don't have control. So you literally have to be just unbelievably brave and continue to put yourself in that position. But are you even putting yourself in that position?
Yeah.
Who's in control? So really, this is why people talk about grace and why you have to have grace. And grace is the idea that luck is a less nice word, but you've been lucky enough to experience something and that you didn't choose it. But it also makes you the most humble person in the world too, because you can't say, I did this, or I'm enlightened. That's why someone like Shanti or any spiritual teacher will not be like, I am amazing, because they realize that they're not responsible whatsoever. And a lot of artists will say, I'm not, this just flowed out of me, this song wrote itself, this book wrote itself, because for them to be humbled by what is flowing through them, it would be, if they were to take ownership of that as an ego, well then they're done.
Mm-hmm.
Am I making any sense,
Yeah,
Sean?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. No, just when you were talking about the ego wanting to say I'm enlightened, that sort of thing. It's very easy for that to
it wants to
happen
hijack all the time.
without realizing.
It's very easy to know though, if you're speaking at all, it's ego.
As soon as you think you're enlightened,
Just don't speak.
Huh?
Just don't speak.
Well, that's it. I mean, you can use your ego in a way to point towards non-egoic stuff, but it's not the same thing. Because the one thing is to not be thinking and to allow a non-dualistic viewpoint, which is, I mean, any word creates. How can I say this? I think, let's think of a sock, right? Because of the way language is, when we think of a sock, it's very obvious to us what a sock is, but what we don't think about is everything that's not a sock, because it would be an extremely efficient way to think and talk. If by me saying sock, I'd have to list, okay, a sock is not a chair, it's not an airplane, it's not my mother, and so on and so on and so on. So by anything we label, we're leaving out everything that it is not. And again, this is why it's important to realize that there is two levels of reality to live on. One level, we label things and they become what we believe them to be, and that's the universe. Is why if you listen to the Kabbalion, it says the universe is mental, it's all a mental construct. But I'm kind of, this is so hard to explain that I'm losing track of myself already, but anything that you label, you're separating the world, so you're breaking it into bits. And it's very easy if you've just got black and white on a blackboard. Okay, you've got black and you've got white, you've already broken it in two. You've labelled one as black, but in order to have any black, there's got to be white, because if it was all black, then you wouldn't have a word for it, because there's no difference. If it was all white, you wouldn't have a word for it, because there's no difference. But in the world, what we do is we single out certain pieces and we separate it, and we go, that's a sock, and everything else isn't a sock. So we split the world up, and that's what language does. It only works that way. It's impossible to have a sentence where you are not separating things, subject object as well. It's like, I am, or it is raining. Well, what's raining? The rain is raining. The
sky is pouring rain.
There's so many different things you can say like that, like where.
But this isn't a bad thing to use language to, label things to make life easier.
We wouldn't have the ability to speak to each other or communicate through abstract thought. But the problem is that you forget that the abstract thought isn't the experience, and that's what happens over time and millennia of using language all the time. So you can talk about swimming till the cows come home, but if someone has never swam, they'll just have an idea of swimming which isn't actually swimming. And it's the same with the world everywhere, is that your idea of the world is not the world, but because you have those perspectives, it's almost like you have rose-tinted glasses on. So imagine if you're looking at the whole world with rose-tinted glasses all the time. Everything is slightly rose-coloured. You wouldn't even know that the world isn't slightly rose-coloured. You'd be like, yeah, this is how the fucking world is. It's not until you take those glasses off that you realise the world is slightly different to how you perceive it to be. But we constantly perceive the world through our thoughts. We label everything and we break everything to bits, and we see the world that way through our thoughts. And until you blast your fucking brains out with some magic mushrooms and cannabis and some other things, now you can do it through years of meditation, of course, and that's the safe, proper, intelligent way to do it. But if you're a little bit lazy, and if you
why is it the intelligent way?
Yeah, I knew Christo would disagree with me here. I guess it's the intelligent way because it is the way where there's little amount of confusion and as slow process as possible.
Intelligent or patient way?
Patient, I would say. Yeah, well said.
Or slow.
Slow.
Intelligence is not patience.
True.
It's not patience.
True. Sorry, yeah, I was just a bit brash there. But anyway, because when you get into that experience, like, it is undescribable. And it's not the mystical experience part of it. It's not that part where you're like having all these visions and you're seeing the trees moving. It's not that Hollywood kind of the world warping around you. It's when you get past that and you're sitting there, the world looks normal and there's not a fucking word going on in your head, and you see everything like you've never seen it before, and it's the same as it always is, except you are not there witnessing it. You are part of it. You are in it. It is in you. It's all the one thing, and there's no separation going on, and that is an incredible experience. And you never look at the world the same way again, because you realize that all the time you're thinking, you're just actually blocking stuff all the time. You're blocking, and you can't even stop blocking unless you really, really go deep into changing your whole way of being, which is scary, and it means living in the moment all the time. But when you live in the moment, it means that you are constantly waiting to do something without thinking. So the past, that's why people say when they become enlightened, their whole life changes. Like, oh, I was an investment banker and now I'm a yoga instructor. Because when they were an investment banker, they were constantly thinking. They're like, okay, tomorrow I've got to do X, Y, and Z. In order to be successful, I've got to do X, Y, and Z. And then all of a sudden they're like not thinking, let's say. And let's say they've gone deep into it. Let's say they've just blasted through to the other side. Then they're sitting there waiting to see what happens at every moment. And the thoughts that come into the head, then they take them as directions. They're not taking them as, I have decided to go and wash my teeth. It's more of a,
it's all happening, man.
It's a realization that I didn't choose this thought to wash my teeth. So
it's like the hippie movement. It's all happening. It's all happening.
And even then, it's so complicated. As you said, it's like a dance too, because if the thought comes in and says, murder that fool, you have to be like, well, hang on here. Who's speaking? Is it society? Is it me? Is it what's going on here? And that's why it's like a dance. It's very hard to know what to do. You got to let go of the thoughts and kind of act from an instinct more often.
But then if you act from instinct all the time, you might do some terrible things.
Yeah, maybe.
But that's in society's eyes.
That's the trust and faith type of thing, isn't it? Where you kind of go, let's see what happens here.
Oh God.
Yeah, and this is sort of what I was trying to get at earlier. Like when you're acting from, I'm going to say awareness. I don't know if that makes sense. If you're acting from awareness, right? It has like you will only do you will do certain things that are in your eyes or in awareness's eyes like the right thing to do in that situation.
Yeah, but not in society's eyes.
Well, it could be.
In some
most likely not.
Probably would be.
You should have seen me in the gym the other night.
Was this? You were telling us about
I was telling you guys that when I smoke cannabis, it gets kind of weird, like a very strange. It's not the purported story that most people have. And I actually listened to an hour and a half's talk on YouTube there today. It's called Cannabis and Spirituality, and setting partly has a big thing to do with it. But I went to the gym and I smoke weed, and then you never see that bloody Ido Portal lad who does all that movement training.
Oh yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah. So it's basically like I'm just going to allow my body to do what it wants to do, and I do all sorts of weird movements and stretching and weights and stuff. And to anybody looking at the gym, I caught several times people like laughing at me because it is weird, man. It's like what I'm doing. It like at one point I went over to the lat pull down machine, right? And I was like, I didn't sit down. I put my knee against the footrest and I went into like a lunge with my knee against the footrest, and then I leaned underneath it and I pulled it down to the middle of my back and held it there, and I was up and down with it, which is like the stupidest movement.
You're the guy in the
videos. Exactly.
You know the videos.
I'm the guy from the
Did
videos.
you ever see those videos, Sean?
I think so.
There's these videos that go around social media of like some weirdo in the gym and he's just doing this weird move, and then everybody that's actually sticking to the rigid structure or what's expected that you're supposed to do in the gym is like, what's that guy doing? He has no idea what he's doing.
Like some guy sitting upside down on the fucking thing, like doing it wrong. But basically, my body was saying like, this is what you need to do. And I was going with it, regardless of people looking at me going, you're weird. Like all the time, Sharon is constantly saying to me, hi, Shar. She's like, you're, what would she'd say, like, people are going to think you're a fucking psychopath weirdo. And I always say, I don't care. So, I guess I can't do it as all the time, but especially if I smoke a bit of weed, then it's literally that there's a willpower of my own or the ego or the ideas in my head or the thoughts, and then there's a willpower or something else, and you can kind of let that something else take over.
But I just don't.
Kundalini.
Why would it tell you to do something strange with weights?
It's trying to fix my injuries and heal me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And did it help?
It's what
does
feels
help.
right to
Okay,
him.
well, fair enough.
It's what
then.
feels right to him.
Mm,
He's feeling
exactly.
rather than thinking.
Yes. Right. 5 minutes left.
Yeah, so, no. That's cool, man.
You weirdo.
I've really enjoyed this.
Yeah, it was fun.
Went very quickly, actually.
I was going to say, yeah, we should get together sometime, and can I say this in the radio? Or
You
should
can
we
say
put the
anything you
disclaimer?
want.
We should get together sometime for
Disclaimer.
an evening and do some illegal activities and record something while we're doing that. When I say illegal activities, that sounds even worse. My God! Look, we should take some substances that grow out of the ground naturally.
Potatoes.
Yes, exactly.
For anyone that's listening internationally, that's all we do here in Ireland. Diddly dee, potato.
and then maybe talk about it while we're doing this.
Psychedelic potatoes.
Exactly.
That's a great name for some sort of page.
Mm.
Instead of Terrifying
But
Enlightenment.
There you go,
There's-
psychedelic potatoes.
So let's do
That's what we are.
a different type of disclaimer than usual. I'll say that there is I think Sean actually expressed this very well in a text he sent me once. He said that there's high likelihood of confusion on if you take magic mushrooms, and that is very, very true. It takes several trips to actually feel your way into what's going on, because it's so alien to what you're used to that you have to feel your way into it, and at first you're going to try and think your way through it, and that's when you'll get serious paranoia, freak outs, problems, what the typical label of a bad trip, because you haven't felt your way through this yet.
We have to make sure and also remind people that, when we talk about these things, we're not saying that everyone should do them by any means, because there are some people that it will never work for.
Mm-hmm.
It will never be the right way.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're always better off meditating.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, sometimes meditation won't even work for so many people. Like, there's always going to be a percentage, a section that something either works for or doesn't work for.
Yeah, your path is your path.
Yeah,
Whatever that
there's
may
no
be.
one right way,
Mm.
essentially.
I agree. Yeah. And these substances aren't. I don't know. I think it's physically, they don't create a physical dependence. So what that means is you can't get addicted to.
But here's the
but
here's
you can
the
get
thing.
addicted to anything.
That's it.
And
Yeah.
But you can get but it's important
Yeah.
to categorize that as it's not like something like alcohol, for example. You can actually become
Yes,
physically
that's evidentially
addictive
proven
to it.
that, yeah.
Whereas with magic mushrooms and cannabis,
It's mentally.
you only get habitually
Yeah, you can
addicted
become
to it because you enjoy the feeling of it, and,
Mhm.
and you don't enjoy the feeling of not having it.
Yeah.
Maybe you're anxious in your everyday life, and in order to relieve your anxiety, you start overly indulging in anything,
Anything.
and then that's an addiction, and that's the risk with doing anything in this life, including magic mushrooms,
Even
including cannabis.
exercise.
Even
I was addicted to exercise.
yeah, people can exercise to the point where they break all their bloody
Yeah.
bones and they get
Tore a
fractures,
hamstring.
and yeah. So if you are concerned about having an addictive personality, I would not necessarily recommend that you take magic mushrooms and cannabis, unless you're willing to use it responsibly, which would be once every 2 weeks minimum. Sorry, not when I say minimum, you shouldn't do it more often than once every 2 weeks.
That's
But
just
we don't advocate that people
no.
use
People
illegal
need to
substances.
no. People need
Sorry?
to.
We don't advocate that people use illegal substances. We just talk about our own experiences.
We advocate the freedom for people to do what they wish, but we don't advise that people use anything without the right responsibility, research, and moderation.
Especially if you're under 18.
Especially when your brain is still developing. Your frontal cortex is still developing until around 25.
Yeah, something like that.
Wow.
And so if you use anything before then, you're in the risk of not letting that part of your brain develop, which is the area of the brain that is responsible for you doing the harder thing when it's the right thing to do. It's what is organized and plans ahead, and and a lot of people that affect that part of their development end up just being impulsive their whole life, and then they have problems with addictions because they started drugs young.
All right, guys, let's sign it off. Lovely chatting to you. Looking forward to a nice evening. I think all the people in the other room in there,
Hey guys, how you doing
looking
over
at
there?
us, wondering what the hell we're talking about. So I'm just going to stick on the song, guys. Have a lovely, what day of the week is it? Tuesday. Have a
Tuesday.
lovely rest of the week.
Have a lovely day.
Say goodbye, Sean.
Bye.
Say bye, Christo.
Goodbye.
Goodbye from me.
Om Namah Shivaya Gurave Satchidananda Murtaye Nishprapanchaya